Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
You can hear me. All right.
Right.
You can hear me okay? And then you can mute. Good. All right. So let's see. So I'm going to share some slides with you this evening that sort of share my story. It was 2 years ago next month that I first shared my NDE in detail with anyone, which was this group right here. May not be all the same people, but it was the same group. And it's been interesting since then. This was my crash, my airplane crash that generated the NDE was on October 6th, 2016. So it was less than 2 years when I presented, and now it's been another 2 years. So it'll be 4 years in October. And it's just been like an accelerated roller coaster ride ever since. One I've been very grateful for, that's for sure. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start presenting, and I'll toggle through the slides and I'll speak to them. And then at the end, we'll stop presenting and we can see each other, and I'll answer any questions you want. But what this is about, and I'll go ahead and share this much right now, is I just had a book come out, and really it was at the behest of a few people, but especially Mary Helen Hensley and PMH Atwater. And you'll understand why PMH and I have been involved in a little while. But she really, she said, I demand you write a book. And I was like, all right. And she said that when Jack and I and Robert were down at the IANDS conference last Labor Day. And so I came home, and on Labor Day itself, that Monday, I started writing, and I finished on December 1st. So I finished it in 3 months. And then, we had the end of year holidays come up, and then the final editing. But bottom line is it went live on May 1st. So it's been just over a month since it's been out, and it's been pretty well received. I've actually been very surprised by some of the emails I've gotten, and a lot of podcasts and a lot of attendance to the podcast. The last one I was on, they've had 200,000 downloads, and so we'll see what happens next. But it's really nice to be able to share it with you tonight. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is shift over to the PowerPoint presentation, and I can toggle the slides. Okay, so I'm just going to start right into my NDE. Can you see this, the big slide of where I call the in-between? It's a kind of a scary looking place.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll go from there. All right, so literally for me, there was no tunnel. There was just, I appeared there. I had my airplane crash. They flew me to Hartford. Very quickly, they realized they had multiple 6+ hour operations coming up for which they would just need to put me into a coma because I was escaping from the restraints and just being a handful. So my belief is that when they put me into a coma here, I appeared right here in this place. And so I'm just going to kind of read a little bit here because it's pretty well written. I just don't want to mess anything up. So literally, I appear on the concrete terrace of this abandoned and decrepit skyscraper. And, my right knee's on the ground. My left foot is firmly planted. It's not like I'm aware of having a body. It's just, this is what I remembered. And I looked up and saw this purgatorial post-apocalyptic city, if you will. It looked like something that happened, like 1,000 years after the nuclear blast or the asteroid hit or something like that. And I, as I'm looking around, and I just accepted what I was seeing. I didn't have any fear or, sense of isolation or anything. I just was taking it all in, non-judgmental. All of a sudden, this wave of nausea went through me, and I sort of doubled over with pain, and I said, I don't think I can stand this. And when I said that, within that egg-shaped sculpture on the left came this sound. It's like a light clacking sound. You know, when you're at a amusement park and the roller coaster is ratcheting up the ramp, getting ready to make its big dive, it kind of goes clack, 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 clack. Imagine that, but almost like a whisper. And I looked over there and I knew that thing and I were somehow connected. So I kind of made my way over there. And as I looked through the lattice work, if you will, of the sculpture, I could see these sector gears in there. And they were just sort of free floating in space. And this is what a sector gear looks like. And it's a partial arc of a gear. And you'll find them in clocks or clock-like mechanisms. And because they're a partial arc, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're meant to sweep back and forth. And so what I realized was that this was, these gears were representations of future events in my life. And at one point, you know, when I saw these gears moving back and forth, some were very in focus and some were not. And they could sort of pass through each other. And I said, what is this thing? And with that, this disembodied voice that remained with me throughout the time said, this is the future birthing into the now. This is the process of becoming. And I put my hand through the lattice work to see if I could touch any of the gears. Because like I said, some looked pretty concrete and the others were more ghost-like. And one brushed by my hand and I doubled over in pain again. And with a reflex, I yanked that gear, pulled it out through the lattice work and sort of threw it away. And when I did that, all the rest of the gears that were in there suddenly started spinning around. And I said, what's happening now? And the voice said, each gear is the probability of a thought, word, or action in your future. Your destiny is resetting itself around what you have removed. And I said, how did I know I could do that? Remove that gear in that future moment. And it said, why else are you here? And I said, I have no idea. I don't even know what this place is. And it said, you are in the in-between. And I said, in between what? And it said, everything. The impossible now between the past and the future. And I said something like, you know, that just doesn't make any sense. And it said, it's impossible in its short duration. Yet here you are standing inside the eternity of a single moment. Do you remember who you are in the world to which your body belongs? And I remember standing there thinking, I have no idea. And I said, I have no idea. Right then, if you'd come up to me and said, if you stay any longer, you can't go back, I would have said, go back where? To your family. What family? I was just so depersonalized from who I am here. It was mind-blowing. And when I said I have no idea, it said, now you see the truth in how the past is dust. And I said, why do some of these gears, these futures that I touch, hurt and not others? And it said, all choices have unintended consequences, some unfortunate and some not. The pain each brings is your guide. And I said, where are the gears that feel good? They said, you're not here to feel good. And then a new gear swung into view. And on this one, I could see like a Ferris wheel and my daughter, when she's older, with her two children, which aren't here yet. And she was, you know, putting them into the little Ferris wheel car and they were hanging on. I could just still remember see their little fingers hanging onto the side. They were laughing and they looked at me or threw me maybe into their own world. And obviously I let that gear pass by and stay. But I did return to, you know, try to find more gears to remove because the understanding was that these were bad choices in my future if they caused me pain. So I was there to remove bad choices from my future, like removing obstacles from my path that will make me a better person. So these things would be to my spiritual detriment. And at one point I looked around and I saw this growing pile of gears, you know, these possible bad decisions I can make. And I said, it's starting to look like if I don't have a bad future, I have no future at all, even though I'm starting to feel less pain because it was associated with the pain of these decisions, the pain it would cause me, the pain it would cause other people. I said, even though I'm starting to feel less pain, am I going to die sooner, you know, from doing all this? And the in-between said, your destiny has to fit itself around futures that aren't meant to be. Your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one. I said, I don't know how comforting that is. It said, eliminating bad choices doesn't mean you won't make wrong ones. You won't know they are wrong until after they pass. Since right and wrong are variables over which you have no control, the answers to what comes tomorrow are a waste. Better is understanding the beauty of how everything fits and refits together. And I said, so what am I missing here in my lack of understanding? I said, what is clearly before you? Grace. No one deserves salvation. It can only be given by grace. It is your birthright, but it must be chosen at the expense of the world that separates us. And I said, this fixing my future is painful. I feel bad. I feel ashamed that I don't have a moral compass or some sacred scripture or a mantra or something to guide me. It's just, pain that's guiding me. He said, literally said, if those who have choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy. And at that point, I watched the gear disintegrate into the dust as it passed out of view from the present to the past. And then it said, you can't change the past, but you can make better choices in the future. Everything is interconnected, and pay more attention to your relationships. Be gentle with everyone as I am gentle with you. And I said, gentle? What's gentle about all this? He said, you prayed for something for which being here is the answer. And now the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it. And with that, I looked once more at the vista that you see on your screen, and then back to the egg and put my hand up on it. And I said, I think I can live with this now. And with that, I woke up in the hospital. And I would say it probably took me about another week after they brought me out of the coma, which I was in for a week, to have any real memory whatsoever. And that's when they moved me from the Hartford Trauma Center to the Gaylord Rehabilitation Hospital. And when I woke up, this is a picture that was on the wall. My wife taped it there. This gives you a hint of the kind of life I used to live. So as I looked at this picture, to my wife, this was like the best version of myself. You can see it's like a real, here's the guy with the cigar and the war scarf, and he's gun running to people who are fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's like a real guy's guy or perfectmatch.com picture, And with that, I looked at it and I said, yeah, that's her saying, this is the man I want you to heal back to being. To her, this was the best version of myself. But when I looked at it, I said, almost like I don't know who that guy is anymore. That's not me. I don't define myself that way. And I just felt like it was so many lifetimes ago already that picture was, and that was me. But I get it. And this actually sort of plants the seed for what we can talk about later in terms of the challenges an NDE can bring to your most personal relationships. And I remember one time when I'm sitting there, kind of going through all this, because you can imagine with a picture like that on the wall, everybody who walks in there looks at the picture, looks at me, and now they want to talk and they want to hear the stories. But one friend said, did you have a bad premonition on the day you got into the cockpit of your plane, the day it crashed? And she's the vice president of the American, I think it's Psychical or something like that, association in New York. William James, the psychologist in the 1800s, founded it. It's very serious about its research into paranormal activities. And I said, that was a perfect question for her to ask. I said, it's really interesting because of my NDE, I can feel it giving me the answer to that question. And I said, forget premonition. If I'd had full knowledge of what was getting ready to happen, that I was going to crash that day, well, I've had the guts to get into the cockpit anyway. Because if God wants to take you to the side for a little while for some one-on-one time, what price is too great to pay? And besides, if he's the one who's asking, do you think you're getting out of it? But I said, I don't know that I can give the right answer, in terms of, yes, I would get in the cockpit. But I said, I think being able to formulate the question and bringing it up to that starting point may be enough for now. So this is part of what I used to do. Like I said, it was gun running and running other things for Joint Special Operations Command. But when I wasn't doing that, I was doing this. I was a war journalist for NBC News, and they didn't know anything about what I was doing for the military, which is fine. They didn't need to. But I aired a lot of reports, obviously because of I'll say my military connections. I was able to get a lot of interviews. A lot of people weren't able to, or able to draw in a lot of resources that delivered me to a story. So that was pretty cool angle to be able to work. But this is in Iraq. That little left-hand picture on the side where you see me with what looks like a little flat satellite dish, that's the day I launched and showed the world an invention I created, which was essentially shrinking a TV truck into a backpack. And that was my prototype system, and that's me in Mexico going live to the Harvard Science Center. Before that, I used to make wildlife films for National Geographic, and I lived in Africa off and on for 14 years. But a Disney film crew came out with a satellite phone like this, and I was 300 miles from anybody. And when I saw that and that they had instant communication, I thought, has anybody ever pushed video over that? And they said, we don't know. I said, I'm going to figure out how to do it. And I did. I was the first in the world to do it, and I was the only one for quite a few years there. And I got to go to all 7 continents. I field produced the Titanic expedition for Discovery. I went to Mount Everest a few times. I integrated telemedicine units that were destined for the space station. And I was a lecturer at Yale University School of Medicine and a NASA principal investigator testing the integration of these systems. And we went back to Everest 2 more years where the climbers were actually wearing this stuff or swallowing this stuff. And we could get all the live medical feeds from their bodies as they were climbing up to the summit and sending that off to the Army to look at and other people as well. So as the dot-com bubble burst and, there wasn't any more going to Everest or the Titanic, the only people left, who could utilize my technology and my skills were the major news corporations. So I was off to Afghanistan right after 9/11, that earlier photo. And then as Iraq heated up, I was over there. I was embedded with the Marines and had touch points with the Army as well. So all of these shots you're looking at here are clips from video that are on YouTube. So what happened was I met a widow with 3 babies. I figured I haven't done that yet. So I decided to leave the war business because she and I were dating, and these 3 babies, I thought, it's not really fair that they get to see me coming into the picture more and more as a father figure and then perhaps losing me again. And so I retired from the war business and translated some of my skills over to the corporate world. And my wife said, now that you're not traveling as much as you used to, why don't you build that airplane you're always talking about? I said, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Because I'm a pilot. And so this is an airplane that I was in love with as a child. It's a World War I airplane. It's a Fokker triplane. That's me flying it. And I built it. I came up with the paint scheme. Everything on this plane I built. It took me a few years to do it. But I was just in love with that period of aviation because it was still so new, and the whole idea, I guess, of chivalry and the air back in World War I and all that. It was just pretty cool. So I built that and flew it, and then I sold it to an Air Force pilot, and then I got bored, so I built another plane that I was in love with as a child, and that's called a Flying Flea from 1933. And you can see the work that goes into building the wing in my messy basement. And the picture up on the upper right is a picture from the mid-1930s when it was really popular over in England and France. The bottom right is the plane I built. And you can see on the lower left, I had it on a little trailer to take to an air show. This was about 2 weeks before my crash. And everybody just loved it. They wanted to have their selfies with it because it looked like something out of a Disney cartoon. And then, so I took it up on October 3rd, 2016 for its first test flight. And I really didn't like the way it handled. I thought it seemed kind of unstable. So I said, okay, I'll wait 2 or 3 days and then I'll take it up again and I'll try to figure out its quirks. And it was on the second pass around the airfield that I lost my engine. I was able to get it restarted, but then it quit again. I wasn't able to make it back to the airfield. And this is just north of Waterbury, Camp Mattatuck Boy Scout camp, if anybody knows where that is. And the only place left for me to land was a lake at that Boy Scout camp. It was right next to the airstrip, but because this was a vintage style airplane, it was what we call very dirty aerodynamically, and it just wasn't very clean at all. So I aimed for the lake. I came in hot, and I overshot the lake's bank at a height of about 6 feet, and I crashed into all these tree trunks in that equivalent of a soapbox derby car with wings, and the entire aircraft, being made of wood, just splintered into matchsticks right away. You can see up in the upper right, that's where I came to stop. And the bottom right gives you a real idea of the aircraft after the crash. That angled part that is open, and then you can see that wing section on top of it, that was the back of my seat, which means when the plane stopped crashing, there was no plane left around me. Just the part behind me I was still seat belted to. But I broke all my ribs. I ruptured both lungs. I had a hole in my lower back due to the engine battery breaking loose and hitting me at 70 miles an hour. My right leg was, multiple fractures. I usually say it looked like a pretzel. And my right ankle was all busted up, and my chin was even shredded. I couldn't make words because the skin was just kind of hanging down. And so other than that, I was fine. There happened to be a man fishing in the Boy Scout camp that day because it was nice and quiet. So why not? It was in October. So he luckily had his cell phone on him and called 911. It was also lucky that even though in the news story he was cast as a retired teacher, he was also a retired police officer, meaning he dealt with seeing trauma, car crashes or domestic violence or who knows what, people getting robbed or beat up. So he didn't freak out because that would have probably gotten me killed quicker. So he kept me propped up, called 911, and they sent Lifestar out, who was able to pull me out of the aircraft and fly me up to Hartford. And that screenshot I have in the middle is from my phone. My friend, when he went by the hangar and picked up my iPhone, when you pick it up, it kind of shows you the latest messages. And then he took a screenshot of it, and I said, you have the same warped sense of humor I do, because it says your evening news has arrived. There's been an airplane crash. And, oh, you missed a call from your wife, because she gets the same news flash, and she wondered, oh, my God, is that possibly me that crashed? And by my not answering, she figured out it was. So I had to put that in here. Okay, so anyway, following that, I laughed and I said, this is some of the best press I ever had. The guys wrote it up, and then they actually came out. When I came home from the hospital, they actually came by and we did a follow-up article. So that was pretty cool. But to be honest, it was interesting. So I'm in the hospital. Let's say it's a week after I've come out of my coma. And it's like this video feed is just playing over and over and over in my head of what you saw before with what I call the in-between, the kind of gothic looking near-death experience place. And I didn't really, I guess I had heard of near-death experiences. I certainly had heard of out-of-body experiences, but it was just going over and over and over. And every time it went through my head, there was more detail and more detail. And it was just, like an obsessive compulsive thing. It's just like, what is going on here? And finally, I told my morning nurse, her name is Jen, and she was really the A-team. She was fantastic. And I noticed a lot of times she would just hang out to just talk, like she enjoyed being in there. So I said, listen, this crazy stuff's going on in my head. Do you mind if I share it with you? She said, sure. So I told her pretty much what I've shared with you today. And she started crying. I said, why are you crying? And she said, because because you're magical. and I don't want you to die. And I said, well, first of all, you're a nurse in a hospital. You see death. And she said, yeah, but I've never seen anyone like you. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, okay, everybody in here gets one doctor 15 minutes a day because everybody's busy. I said, okay. She said, for some reason, you have 3 to 5 doctors who are in here for an hour, hour and a half. I walk by, I snoop, I listen in. You're not talking about your medical case. You're talking about life, the universe, and everything. And one of them wants you to be in business with him so badly, he has you on international conference calls at night with your leg up in the air in this cage and all doped up on painkillers. She said, I've just never seen anything like this. And this is a clue to one of the, I guess, after effects that happened after my crash. You've heard and you know of, you definitely know people that you could say this is true for, that after their near-death experience, like PMH says, if you weren't psychic before, you are after, and if you were before, you're more so after. Okay. I wouldn't say I was, running around as psychic or anything, but I had a pretty good way of connecting with people. I mean, think about it. I'm running all over the world doing crazy stuff. You've got to be able to make friends. You can't just be, alienating people. So I had a pretty good way of connecting with people. But it was really like the superpower, if you will, was empathy. And it's like everybody just liked me. And my nurses did. I had 3 great shifts of nurses. All the doctors, like I said, they wanted to come in and just hang out. Wanted me to be in business with one of them. And one night I remember around 3 a.m., this older woman who was a nurse came in, and I just pretended to be asleep because I didn't feel like talking. And before she left, she reached over and kissed me on the forehead. And I just remember being so touched by that act of kindness. I just couldn't believe it. So anyway, I'm a pretty fast healer. And 7 weeks after my crash, I was home. I was in a wheelchair or on crutches and having to butt hop up the stairs if I wanted to shower. But, it was really nice to be home and out of the hospital. And so I guess with that, as I'm healing, now I have my computer. I can start to research this near-death experience thing. I actually thought maybe I was in purgatory. So I'm researching purgatory. But I found out that wasn't really a concept until about the 1200s. And then I don't know, it just found my way to the IANDS website one day, and with that I was able to discover more. Part of the confusion, though, was in the ways in which my NDE just didn't fit your typical checklist. Like I said, there was no going through a tunnel, going or coming. There was no meeting, dead loved ones like my grandmother, grandfather. There was no big feeling of unconditional love, and there was no boundary that I was aware of no return, and certainly no life review per se. I would say those future choices that were presented to me as a fruit of past actions kind of represented a life review in terms of being actionable intelligence. Here are the things that are in front of you based on what you've done before. Now you can choose accordingly. Okay, great, got it. And so, like I said, I was thrown off a little bit by that, but I just sort of pressed on, and then I found the IANDS group here in Farmington, and came to 2 or 3 meetings and just kept quiet and listened. And then Jack and Tina and I talked, and they made me feel very welcome, and it just kind of went on from there. There was certainly a time that I would say, because one of my majors was physics, I've always kind of looked at even spirituality. I've always looked at it from an analytical point of view to look for an internal logical consistency to either the things I've read, or I could say now the experiences I've had. And at a sort of a consumer grade level of quantum physics, nothing like huge math boards or anything like that, I would download books and listen to them, and it really made sense what they were talking about. And I started to understand what I saw and I experienced from, again, sort of a high level view of quantum mechanics. As I was mentioning, these different gears could pass through each other, representing moments in my future. In quantum physics, they would call that a superpositioning of multiple probabilities for a single moment. And think about it. I mean, that's true. I mean, every moment of your life, you probably have more than one decision you can make about, do I go left or right, up or down, in or out? Do I stay? Do I go? Do I want this job or that job? Whatever. And there are many, many more we could actually probably be making. And the clarity of these different gears, you may remember I mentioned some were very definite and some were more ghost-like. I'm pretty sure that the ones that were very definite were the ones that had the greatest chance of actually coming to fruition. The ones that were more ghost-like, I think, had less chance, but they were still there because, as we all know, people do win the Powerball every now and then. And I remember it was hard to focus on the gears. It was really hard. I mean, I was looking at them, but they were like in focus and out of focus, as if my eyes were going crazy. But the video images that they represented of these events in my future were very, very clear. And I think the reason the gears themselves were hard to focus on is because they were probabilities. And how do you really focus in on a probability? And yet its meaning was clear, but the representation was not. And then I started thinking more about time, because that impossible now, you're standing in the eternity of a single moment. Lewis Carroll had had a great quotation out of Alice in Wonderland. How long is forever? Asks Alice. It says, sometimes just 1 second, replies the White Rabbit. I thought Lewis Carroll must have really, he was dialed in. And in quantum physics, there's an incredibly short period of time called Planck time, named after Max Planck, who was born before the Civil War, and yet he's the father of quantum physics. So just putting those two worlds together is kind of amazing. But Planck time is so short, it's 10 to the minus 44 seconds, which is 100 millionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of 1 second. It's a time so short that quantum effects manifest. I mean, like they say, if anybody says, I understand quantum physics, they're lying. They do not. It's like we understand its ambiguities. We understand its uncertainties. We understand its probabilities, because that's what it's all about. But to sit there and say, okay, I'm really dialed in now, I don't think anyone's quite there yet. Maybe more likely a guru somewhere than a scientist somewhere else. But it really did help. And to be honest, as I'm putting us all together from both a spiritual mystical side and from the quantum physics side, and then reading more literature, I'm finding NDE books on, I go for my drive, because that's how I get my quiet time. And I would listen to Audible, and there was this book by PMH that I listened to, and in there she said, oh, and there's this particular condition for people who've been in a car crash or suffered from a fall. Well, I started listening. And then she said, she started talking about unique attributes of what happens to you mentally, physically, and spiritually at that moment of impact. And then she started describing the type of NDE you have. Like, you go to a gray and colorless place. And I was like, what? I almost went off the road when she said that. And then she literally said, it's an in-between place. And she used the phrase in between 31 more times in her book after that. And I just sat there and I thought, okay, this is the first time. I said, first of all, I feel like I've had a 1 in a million experience within an already 1 in a million population. And now here's this person basically describing my experience to me using terms I've learned on the other side. Holy cow, So I said, I'm going to meet her. I don't care if she's a recluse on the other side of the world. I am going to meet her. And I think I really started to feel our sense of connection then and there. And I'll just say, we have become friends. And she's amazing. You see, like 18, 19 books out there, but she's been very gracious of her time with me. And and I'm going to lead up to something in just a second that you'll get a chuckle out of. So as I'm putting all this together, as I feel like I'm starting to finally get some answers, I call her and we were talking for like 3 hours one day. And let's say it was in February of last year, in fact. I went out to start my car before the call so it'd be warm and I could go for my like meditation drive afterwards. And at 4:40 p.m., I just sort of, and I am not, yeah, well, let me just say, I felt this sort of change of energy in my body. And I'm not someone who's really tuned into that a lot of times, or wasn't. And without saying a word, without me saying a word, she said, our energies are starting to meld. And I said, yeah, I can feel it. It's just a tiny little shift. And she said, yep. And here's how we handle that. Great. And then we started talking about what I called, the impossible now and what she calls the eternal now. And so in that moment, we kind of were in that space. We were in that impossible eternal now at 4:40. Okay, we hang up the call at 5. I walk outside to get my car. I look up at the porch light. It immediately blows out as soon as I look at it. And I just smile and thought, well, situation normal. I get in my car. It's got 2 clocks in it, one in the radio, one on the dash. The one on the radio was the time I expected to be, like 5:05 p.m., something like that. The one on the dash was frozen at 4:40 p.m. I have a decent car. It's the first time that ever happened. And I thought, wow, I have 2 different clocks on 2 different time zones, one on in-between time, because it just stays on 4:40, and the other one on normal time. And it happened one other time when I was sort of feeling close to the in-between, and it has not happened since. It was just amazing. Well, these are the things that come up to tell you you're not crazy, right? I mean, you can sit there and everybody can say, oh, it's a hallucination, oh, you're crazy, whatever. But when you have these outer manifest aspects of electronic anomalies, for example, I mean, come on, after a while you start to notice it as a pattern, especially if you didn't even know about near-death experiences or any of these other attributes at the time. So here's something kind of cool that came up, and this has continued to go on. Other than blowing out light bulbs, blowing up my whole HVAC system, my microwave, all kinds of things, computers going wonky, phones go crazy. On the left is a screenshot of my iPhone when I was going to visit PMH. I was going down to see my mom in Charlotte. PMH is in Charlottesville. You look at a map, it's a straight line. So I was going to stop by and say hi to her. And 20 minutes out from her home, a friend of mine, an NDE friend of mine, texted me on Facebook Messenger and said, hi, I don't know why I'm thinking about you right now. I said, because I'm 20 minutes away from PMH's house. She said, well, tell Phyllis I said hi. I said, yes, I will. And while she's typing there, all of a sudden, believe me, I'm driving, both hands are on the wheel, and my phone is not in dictation mode. My phone started to type its own message, and it's right there on the screen, said, thank you for being a kind and loving person. I saw that type into that space, and I'm driving, and that's my message. And I was like, okay, I don't know if that's meant for her or for me or whatever. I almost went off the road because I didn't know what else it was going to say. And if it hit send, obviously I sent it and I can't back out of it if it suddenly said something really bizarre or strange. But I told her, my friend, about that later. She laughed. And when I told PMH about this, 25 minutes later, she just laughed and said, this is just the beginning. On the right is a screenshot. A friend of mine put me onto a Hungarian researcher who lives in Austria, and she was starting up a new project. And I'd sent her an email saying I'm interested. She sent an email back, said, hey, that's good. We'll talk. And then the next morning, as I got ready to drive out on like this Monday morning or something, I thought, well, let me just have one more check of my emails before I go. And this email was there. And you can see it's sent from Victoria on March 10th. So, this is only a few weeks after the whole PMH thing when, there are all these electronic anomalies going on. And so on March 10th, Victoria sent me an email. But the body of the email says, Happy 2008. It's from 11 years ago. And it's from my first wife when who lives in England. We follow this really obscure yogic path. And I was saying, do you know of anybody I can talk to up here in the Northeast of America who might be on this path? And this was her response of who to go talk to find out who's around here. 11 years apart. Imagine having an email where it's coming in from somebody, it gets merged with somebody else from 11 years before. Both, you could say, are kind of a spiritual nature. That's interesting. But it's sitting in a folder that didn't exist before a couple of weeks ago. And I talked to all my because I work in IT. I know the smartest people who have the highest Cisco certifications. And I said, how could that happen? And they just looked at me and shook their head. I said, there's no way that could happen. I said, all right. So I've had more. I've been on podcasts. And well, the thing now is when I talk about the in-between, and I really kind of get into it, Siri on my iPhone goes off. And she just wakes up and she thinks she's part of the conversation. One day it happened 10 times. And then she started to wake up and call 911, which sets off this weird wah, wah, wah alarm. And I was on a podcast recently and it happened. And I told the guy, wait, cut, let's, and he goes, no, I'm leaving it in because it really proves the point. I know you've just been sitting here talking to me and I heard that. I know what that is. And so we laughed and it was part of the show, which, like I said, kind of drives home the point. But it definitely drives home the point that you're not crazy, that there really is something going on here. And that's amazing. It really is. So let me just see here what I was going to say. Yeah, like I said, the crazy things with light bulbs and microwaves and all that. It just keeps going. But I think that for me, once you kind of get over the initial mystery of what this was, and you get down to this is what it was, and here is an organization, here are several organizations, and then you post your story, and then it's interesting that people are reading your story and reaching out to you because there's something unusual about it, or maybe they had something kind of similar. And then you start to share your story. For me, we'll hear a lot of people were very shy about sharing the story. For me, I had no choice. Even in a hospital, I felt like it was almost as if the story was trying to push out through my very pores. Like, no, I need you to talk. I need you to talk about me. Okay. So that's why I started with my nurse, Jen. And so as I went to this IANDS group here in Connecticut and heard some of the speakers, I was encouraged to take that a little more seriously. So like I said, 23 months ago, I shared it with the people who attended for the first time. And then from there, I met a screenwriter who had an NDE, and she had one of her own, and then she had a shared near death when her dad died. So she got it. I mean, she got the story. She got everything at a gut level. Plus, she was a very good screenwriter. So she and I continue to work on a few things. And let me see. And then, like I said, we went to the conference last year, and PMH and Mary Helen Hensley both said, you really have to write this book. So I came home and I did, and that's what we're doing. So with that, this sort of gets back to the cover photo of the book itself. This was in Namibia, Southwest Africa. Again, I said about being 300 miles from anywhere. That's where we were making our wildlife films. And this is just on top of a sand dune. And it just seemed like a great picture for the cover of the book because, our stories don't begin here and they don't end here. We're all just passing through. And so one of the things the in-between told me, and I've even found a biblical reference that I want to tie into that it's the in-between isn't a place you go to or come from. It's simply a place you are. And so with that, I can take any questions you have. If there was anything that was clear, I'd be happy to answer it. If you want to share your experience, be happy to hear it.
Jim, I would like to ask you about the synchronicity, some new synchronicity that's going on with you.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah, that's great. It's interesting too, because, what is a synchronicity, right? I mean, we know it when it happens and we're scratching our head going, what was that? They definitely seem to occur more after your NDE. And I've wondered, is it because an NDE is kind of reharmonizing you to your natural destiny, your natural path? And so if you're doing all the right things you should be doing, maybe synchronicities are the normal fact of the day. But a couple of months ago, I had somebody come by to price repairing a window, and he took a couple of my window screens to repair. And I went by there to pick him up on Friday. I got there at 4:30, and I started talking to the owner and his wife about my NDE. I know, like give me 5 minutes with a stranger, and guess what I'm talking about, even now. And they were really interested, and it was nice because I gave them an out, like, oh, I know this sounds crazy. No, 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 tell us more. Okay, fine. And while we're talking, at 5 o'clock on that Friday, all of a sudden their daughter walked in. And, we paused talking. I look up at her. I don't know that's her daughter. I just see this young woman walk in. And she looked at me and oh, this is great. Back up just a second. The man's wife asked me, she said, well, after this experience, were you more intuitive? It was a natural question, right? Are you more psychic or anything? I said, that is a great question. But for me, it isn't so much about that as it is about relationships, because remember, I was told, pay more attention to relationships and timing, really strange timing. And let's face it, how much of a synchronicity is about the timing, right? So I answered her question that way, relationships and timing. Literally, as I said that, the daughter walks in and she looked at me and she said, I remember you. And I look back at the parents, I look at her, and she was an upper thoracic emergency room nurse who took care of me from the plane crash. I mean, wow. And I looked back at the mom and I said, that's your answer right there to your question. And I said, what's really cool, I said, what were the chances of this happening right now, today? Because we're 50 miles from Hartford. I said, the really cool thing about this moment is that if I had been able to say, yeah, my intuition is really, the volume is turned up, and gave you a demonstration, it would have answered your question, but I would have kind of owned that moment. But right now, based on you asked that question, the answer walked in the door, and we're all standing here going, wow, nobody owns this moment. We all own this moment. That's how magical it is right now. And I said, that's amazing. And you could just see their gears were turning in their head. They were just trying to put this together. They totally knew what was happening. They knew what they saw. They knew what they experienced. And the daughter, who's obviously, seriously like frontline medical personnel, she totally accepted the story and the experience. So that was a cool synchronicity. But another one followed recently with my book. You know how when you have a book, you want to get some endorsing quotations you can put on there. PMH offered one, Helen Hensley, a couple other people. Well, I reached out to Eben Alexander, and he said he would love to do it. So I shot him the manuscript, and the next day his assistant came back to me and said, he's very excited to do this. He has a couple other projects right now, so it might not be right away. I said, that's fine. And she said, he wants you to be aware of two things: that you both used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that you mentioned in your book that you started this business. It was a silk screen business, but we didn't silk screen shirts. It was more like bottles, like pharmaceutical bottles, Pantene bottles, 18,000 a day, things like that. And nearby, about a block away, was, at that time we called it a halfway house. It was for unwed mothers, young women who didn't want to have an abortion. They wanted to bring their baby to term and just try to figure life out. And so I thought, well, that's hard path. So let me support that by hiring only unwed mothers. So I hired only unwed mothers, and I taught them how to do all the silkscreen stuff. And so Eben Alexander's assistant said the second thing he wants you to be aware of is he noticed you hired only unwed mothers from the Florence Crittenden Home for Unwed Mothers. That was the home his mother was in when she was pregnant with him. And so, like, basically he sees you as someone who is helping people like his mom, and therefore it would have been helping someone like him. And now he's like this Harvard neurosurgeon. And talk about, again, a really beautiful moment of connection, And so these are the things that happen a lot. And you can see that works with the empathy, that works with that interconnection. It works with pay attention to your relationships. It's like, I don't even have a choice. All I have to do is just get out of the way and the magic happens. And everybody knows it's magic and nobody has to say, hey, it was because of me. It's just like, stay quiet and let everybody have a good time. So thanks, Tina. That was a great question. And I was glad to be able to share those moments with you. Any other observations or questions? You may be on mute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm going to try to make this just as real quick as I can. Around my third birthday, on my third birthday, my father was killed at 29 in a tragic accident at work. Didn't know that much about him. All I knew that was he was born and raised in a very small town in northern Maine. And when he was 18, he graduated from high school. And there was a few missing years, like until he was 20. And those years we didn't have any idea where he was, where he lived. But he got drafted, went into the war, came back to Maine, met my mother, and that's known history. My nephew recently, and my history is I'm from another part of Maine. I came to Connecticut simply because of a job, no relatives here, nothing. My nephew recently found online through Ancestry, whatever, my father's draft card. And he, in those years, he lived on my street.
That is amazing. That's incredible.
So is that is that synchronicity? Or
that sounds like synchronicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. I know a lot of people might say that word gets bandied about a lot, but I think when we have a certain coming together of events or people, timing that is just amazing like that, it makes you ask. If it's something that happens that makes you ask what is going on underneath the surface here, that's a pretty good bet. It's probably a synchronicity. That is great, though. Yeah.
Jim, I have a question. Can you hear me?
This is I can hear you. Yeah, Jack.
My question is, in your use of the term grace, could you describe it or define it in your terms based on your experience?
Yeah, I could best describe it using a very short story. One time, a person who was looking for a guru went before this guru and asked, he said, is it true that our destiny is written upon our palms? And the guru surprisingly said, yeah. And the guy goes, well, why do I need you? He goes, just because you know the future doesn't mean you can change it. He said, but if you choose, and remember, I was told it's your birthright. There's a choice you have to make at the expense of the world that separates us. Once you make that choice, or with an NDE, it's almost as if the choice is made for you. You no longer live under the law of destiny. You now live under the grace of God. You could call grace mercy if you want. You can call it anything you want. But the thing is, I don't mean to say it's like the rules don't apply to you anymore, but it sure seems like they got bent. And I'm just saying that it's as if your destiny's been taken over, and it's like your life doesn't belong to you anymore. You're now going to be used in one way or another. Fill in the blank. Make the world a better place. Make people try and make people lessen their suffering a little bit, and it'll become more of a naturally selfless thing. I mean, there really is a transformation that goes on. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. And it really creates a huge taxation on your personal and professional relationships, and even a relationship with yourself, because you're going, was what was true yesterday true today? Because every time you engage in something or with someone, you realize I'm reacting differently. I have different values now. And a lot of people might say you're self-absorbed. My therapist said, you're self-absorbed. And I said, it's funny how self-absorbing and depersonalizing experience can be, but there you go. Jack, I don't know if I answered your question in as much depth as you wanted, but that's the best I can do right now.
Okay, no, that was good. I tried looking it up in the dictionary, and it's it's like a favor or a blessing from God. And I guess the Bible gives word ownership to God.
Yeah.
He's the one who offers grace.
Well, that's one of the other things I noticed, if I could. Now, I know both Bob and Marie have a question. Is that it's interesting, when you talk about, I had a plane crash, and I know this woman who was in a horrible car crash where she had an internal decapitation, and I think like there's a handful of people that survived that, or someone drowned or a terrible disease or something, and all was lost. They were dead, and they came back. And what's interesting is, in most stories, if there was no near-death experience, the climax of that horrible event would be a climax in itself. It'd be a hell of a story. Everybody would probably want to hear it. But the near-death experience makes all that just a footnote. It's almost easy to forget and say, oh yeah, that's right, I had this plane crash. And everyone's like, what? It's like you don't even think about it because you had this huge, again, transformational experience. And I'm grateful for it. I really am. Was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. Would I get in the plane and go do it again tomorrow? Probably rather not. But like I said, would I really have a choice? Bob, I know you had a question, but I saw Marie's hand up. Can I call on Marie for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, two things. One, I had two spontaneous past life regressions. One, I went to the Middle Ages, and I was walking on this path and was toward a chapel because we were doing opening of chakras, and all the church bells on the street were ringing, and that got me back to the Middle Ages.
Wow.
And the little church there that I was walking to, its church bell was ringing as well. And it turns out that I was the town healer.
Wow.
Another time I went back, only this time it was to a Tibetan monastery. I was a monk, and I was in charge of Tibetan singing bowls. And so what do I do now? I do healings with Tibetan singing bowls.
That's great. Carrying on the tradition.
Yeah. And every once in a while, this little monk will speak through me.
Really?
Yeah.
That is so cool.
The second thing, I just have a feeling that there is some connection that you can see about everything that's happening today. We have the COVID virus. We have all this people being killed now by policemen, and that's another big upset. And then you had that big upset with this piece of that, it was a spherical thing with the gears in it. I feel there is a connection that you might be able to see from then and now that you had with your near-death experience.
Remember when I was saying that some of the gears, well, I was told the what and the when were not important. What was important was to see the pattern, how the pattern fits together.
Yeah.
Now, imagine we say, I've just had a transformational experience and I see the grand pattern of the universe and where everything fits. It doesn't mean that you fit into a very good place, but you see your place in the fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Empires come and empires go. The thing is, there's something about the NDE that makes you, once you leave here and see it from a different perspective, you can come back, but you're always going to have that other perspective with one of your eyes, and the other eye is here. And the way I feel about it is empires come and empires go. They always have, and they always will. And in my book, I mentioned that, not to compare myself this way, but I'm just as an example, when Jesus came, the zealots, Judas was a zealot. The zealots wanted him to militarize, like let's kick the Romans out. Well, I think if most of us accept Jesus as who he, is purported to be, he maybe could have done that, right? But he said, what? And they said, yeah, well, you can raise the dead and heal the blind and feed the hungry. And he said, yeah, but in the end, there have always been hungry, and there always will be. There have always been poor, and there always will be. He's like, I'm not here to chase the Romans out. I'm not here to fix the world. I'm here to fix you. And that's the answer. The world cannot be fixed because a lot of what people are coming here to do in their destinies has to do with things that aren't probably going to take them on the most direct path home. They're on the scenic route. They have frustrated desires from the past that have to be fulfilled here. They have wrongs that have to be righted that may look unfair to those who don't know that sort of karmic history, but it's the universe always setting and resetting itself. So to say that this is something that maybe we have to go through and we have to see and that we have to witness isn't going to be a popular answer. I could say that's one of those inconvenient truths that come out of all this. But the main thing is just remember, as like I said before, our stories don't begin here and they don't end here. If right now we were sitting thousands of years ago, and this is Atlantis, just the night before it crashes under the ocean, we could be asking about what's going on with those earthquakes or something like that. If this were on the eve of the Roman Empire and we're all sitting in someone's home talking about the empire's crumbling, it'd be the same kind of conversation. If we were in the Old South 150 years ago, it'd be the same conversation. There have been many ends of ages and many ends of eras. And I've actually wondered, I've really wondered this. Think about it. Of what I've just described, whether it's Atlantis or Rome or the Old South or like Gone with the Wind, some of the movies, their climax is all built around that everything crashing down. And tomorrow's another day, but it's nothing like today, right? And so if you think about it that way, I've wondered if certain souls are born into the world at certain times in which we're essentially born to experience the climax of this movie we're calling life. Like, were there souls who were born into Rome at that time to see the fall of Rome, into the Old South to see the fall of the South, into Atlantis to see the fall of Atlantis? Because from up there, you come, up there being black, white, rich, poor, male, female, doesn't really mean much. It's just a role you play. It's a script in a play you're reading from, but it's not you. And you're not really dead when you die. You'll go right back and we'll compare notes. So these are questions I've asked before, meaning these things were going to happen anyway, because the nature of the world is to have the sun rest. So I'm not trying to skirt answering you, but the way I tend to answer things is non-linearly, and I tend to walk around things and look at them from different perspectives. I hope at least that was helpful.
That was. I had a mini dream the other day, seconds. A bunch of us, we're all going through something terrible, but just all of a sudden it happened, and afterwards it was different, but it was better.
Ah, interesting. Well, maybe that's symbolic to what we're going through right now.
Yeah, because it was just before this happened.
Wow. Well, we're certainly going through a rough patch right now, so let's hope that there is, and I'm sure there is, some light here at the end of the tunnel to use all kinds of force that we relate to. Bob, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Jim, you talked about the in-between and being able to go and pick out different gears and kind of change, the probability of your future. Is there any mechanism for you to go back there every now and then and continue this process? I
always feel I never quite left. I really feel like I have one foot here and one foot there. It's interesting. Basically, I hope I painted the picture accurately that I was very uncomfortable there. There was that kind of standing state of nausea in my stomach, and it was like torture, seeing these gears spin around over and over and over again. Well, every now and then up here in the north, because I'm from the south originally, but the light is different here. The angle of light is different here. And every now and then at a particular time of year, the light angle will be such that it takes me right back to the in-between. And it takes me about 3 days. And it's a split second, but it takes me 3 days to recover. It's like getting gut punched. And I'm just like, wow, it is such an intense place to be that I've really wondered, was I just basically stretched to my, whatever my stage of evolution is, was I stretched to the max to be there to get the most benefit out of the circumstances that I could. And again, I kind of start to run out of words. So I'm never really very far away from it. And I know it sounds weird, but it talks to me. I go driving, and that's my time with the in-between. And it talks to me. I'll give you an example. Okay, so like my wife and I are separated, and 78% of people who have NDEs get divorced. Okay, I mean, we can talk about that, or you can kind of accept it, and it probably makes sense that it should. Not everyone is ready to be on this journey. And there are no good or bad people here. They're just overwhelmed people. And there are a lot of different ways to deal with that. And we're very friendly. I mean, civil, everything is good that way. It's just, well, we were in marriage counseling, and we were talking about changes, like what she would say pre-airplane crash and post-airplane crash, what I would say pre-NDE and post-NDE. And some of her complaints, I said, listen, have I been like this at all since my airplane crash? And she goes, no, you haven't. And I go, yeah, because that person died in the crash. This is what you have left. There is no going back. There's only building anew. And then because I had a therapist who thought I was full of crap, so it was kind of like 2 against 1, I just finally kind of pulled both barrels on this one. I said, listen, our marriage vows say till death do us part. What happens when one of us dies? No matter that we return. Our covenant is broken. The only reason we stay together now is because we choose to. And I'm saying right now, those words were given to me by the in-between, right then, right there. And at one time I was driving around, I said, could you help me with my marriage? Because I don't really pray anymore, because again, I see how everything fits together, and I'm fine. And literally it said to me, bolt out of the blue while I'm driving, said, you'll have a wife for as long as I want you to have a wife. Now, a lot of people get all upset about that, because honestly, we still treat each other as our sexual property. I own you. I'm just saying it. It's a very primal, animalistic thing, and I get it. But if he'd said, you'll have that life for as long as I want you. Okay, I get that. You'll have that job for as long as I want you to have that job. Okay, I get that. But like I said, we start talking about our primal instincts and we get all upset about it. But I realized again, I'm not in control of anything. I mean, even before the NDE, but the NDE really drives it home. All I can do is kind of stay out of the way and let the pattern, by trying to live my life as ethically as I can, let the choices I've made be the right choices, let the path unfold as it should, and trying to not put rocks in anybody else's path either. And whatever's meant to happen will.
Well, Jim, you mentioned like you have a sliver of time every now and then when you feel like you're in the in-between. Have you ever been able to go and take out more gears?
No, but I've said if I had to, I think that was the best version of myself. Not the guy with the cigar, but the guy there who felt like he was getting his butt kicked. That was the best version of myself. Because we don't love the heroes who have a silver spoon in their mouth. We love the heroes who get knocked down and they get up again. And that's kind of what it felt like. And I've said, if I had to go back there and continue that path of man-making, I would go in a heartbeat. Because it wasn't where I wanted to go, but it's obviously where I needed to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mark, you have a question that you wanted to ask? Turn on your microphone. Down on the bottom. Move your finger down to the bottom. You'll see a microphone with a red line, with a line going through it. Bethany, could you help him?
I can't unmute Mark, but in the chat, he had asked a question about reincarnation, asking Jim, did you receive any information about reincarnation? And I know that Marie asked a question earlier that he felt kind of answered it. But Jim, did you receive any information about reincarnation?
No. It's almost like it didn't matter, because there to talk about reincarnation would have been just like looking at a wardrobe of different clothes and saying, okay, well, if you wear these clothes out, here's the next set of clothes. Okay, fine. You know, we got other things to do. But having said that, I have had 3 out-of-body experiences dealing with my past life, how I was supposed to die in this life, but that was changed, and then my future life. I know what if I come back, and I hope I don't, I'm really done. I'm good. But if I have to come back, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm supposed to do in my next life. And it's interesting. So first of all, let me say I've definitely received information about reincarnation. I've never been in doubt of it anyway. It makes so much sense on so many levels. But it wasn't in this particular experience that we were really dealing with that. Can I tell you about the future one I saw, though? I mean, as a process, I mean, I'm not trying to get so much into the details, but I can. I'll be a woman on a Mars mission dealing in telemedicine, like medical personnel. And what's interesting is I had this out-of-body experience back in 1975. Remember I showed you this satellite contraption I invented? I find it interesting that basically 20, 23, almost 25 years later, I've gone from being this kid living in Puerto Rico who teaches tennis to being a lecturer at Yale University School of Medicine, inventing the type of technology that I will use in that future life on Mars in the same way in the medical profession. The reason I say that's interesting is when we see these 5-year-old Mozarts, well, chances are they were a concert pianist in their past life. So was I having a vision of what I'll be doing in the future? And then I lived through the achievements and the aptitudes I would need to have and develop in this life that will take me to that next life and make me good enough to get onto a Mars mission. I find that interesting. I mean, it's just a math problem, right? But it is interesting to sort of say I kind of backed into seeing how that might all fit together and work to do that. And I've always loved the idea of space travel and science fiction anyway. So are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, Jim.
Okay, Jack.
In your experience, if you were to sort of describe it, would you say that you were in another dimension?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, to me, all a dimension probably is just a change in frequency of whatever. I mean, I heard one time people saying, I have no idea what was backing this up, but it was in the science section I was reading. It said it was wondering if the dead are out of phase with us by only 1/4 inch of a wavelength or something like that. And they had all this explanation that kind of made sense out of the thought exercise of that. So yeah, I mean, I think it is probably higher vibrations, for lack of a better term, and without getting too scientific. But one of the things I was thinking about was, okay, remember, and this is across the board. How often do you hear people who have near-death experience talk about when they go somewhere else that the sense of time is different? Either it goes slower there, or maybe it stops altogether. Well, what are we? We are light. Get rid of the body, we're light. E equals mc squared says that if I could push mass to go faster and faster, as it approaches the speed of light, its mass starts to become infinite. The distance between it and the target contracts to 0, and time contracts to 0. turn it around, and another way it's saying is time does not exist for light. So as we leave this grossly, I don't mean gross in a bad way, just dense, packed material plane, and we go up to these higher planes, as they become more refined and less mass or less material and more spiritual, more light, then it makes sense that we would notice the change in how time passes as well. And as we become more pure light, we start to see time contract to zero. Anyway, that's the way I think of it. It's something that kind of makes sense for me.
Okay, well, here's the thing, Jim. You experience these many electrical manifests, and many of those were kind of made available after your experience. Now, last year I did a presentation on communication with the deceased, people in your family who die, and they communicate with the living with electrical events, lights going on and off, flickering, garage doors opening, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, they're electrical. And the thing about those experiences are that they have witnesses. It's not just it's not just a personal experience. Other people see it too. So the event is observable. And so that's it. Wait a minute. So I'm just wondering if the dimension that you were in, or the plane that you were in, if that is the same as the dimension or plane that the deceased are in.
I believe it is. I want to add to that, though. You reminded me of something. My screenwriting friend, Julia, who has said she's also had an NDE and a shared death experience when her dad died. Every time she and I are together, and I really have wondered about the amplification of these after effects when more people, like when we were down at CT-IANDS in Pennsylvania, the credit card machine wasn't working in the entire hotel. And the entire time, no one's key cards were working either. And I told the lady at the desk, it's due to all of us. And she came out from behind the counter, and she wanted to know. And when I was telling her, she said, I just got goosebumps. I said, yeah, that happens too. But it was just nonstop. But anyway, what I wanted to say about that was that, gosh, I went down that rabbit hole and now I forgot. Oh, it was about what you were saying. Okay, it's the electrical anomalies. Yes, I remember what it was. Julia said one time she was driving over to her boyfriend's house. She had her iPhone up on the dash and she's listening to iTunes, but she's also texting me. Yes, you're not supposed to do that, but that's what she was doing. And as she started texting me and we started communicating, she said all of a sudden her iTunes was going crazy and her phone was going crazy with the audio. So she gets there, she shifts over to talking to me when we're talking on the phone now. She walks into her boyfriend's house. Immediately his whole audio system starts going crazy. And by now the boyfriend knows about us. He yells out, says, tell Jim to stop it. And we all laugh. She says, hold on, my son's calling me. Her son was home visiting from university at her apartment. He says, Mom, I was listening to the audio and the audio system just went crazy and it's in the headphones too. Now, you had a whole bunch of witnesses on this, right? What's weird is in a way, it's like I made the mistake of telling my wife. As I mentioned, she was a widow. As I said it, the look on her face reminded me of the story she told me. When her husband died on I-84 in Waterbury around midnight in a car accident, she was home. He was coming home from a wake at a firehouse for a fireman. And she lives here in Middlebury. At midnight, when he had that car crash that he died in, all of a sudden, their stereo system at home turned on, wide open. And it was like on the radio station between stations, that white noise, but it's like turned up 10 out of 10. She jumped out of bed like, what the hell's going on? And she ran downstairs. What's going on? Is somebody in the house? Whatever. No, she turned it off. She didn't know what it meant. She went back to bed. 30 minutes later, the police come by, your husband's dead. He died 30 minutes ago. So when I told her this story about all the audio systems going crazy based on NDE stuff, guess where that took her back to? And then I felt kind of bad. But it's just further verification that once you put a foot over there, or once you have a connection over there, or a loved one over there who's connected with you, electrical and electronic anomalies really can happen, as for me, as evidence that something is going on.
Okay. All right. So when these electrical events happen, what causes them? What kind of energy interferes with the mechanics of our electrical objects, computers, radios, whatever it is? Something is triggering it. What is?
Well, I mean, to me, it obviously speaks to us having this bioelectric field. And I mean, the only time we ever hear of something like that is like electric eel, you know? And I don't have any more insight or information about that. You know, I'm thinking that since it obviously has physically or electronically demonstrable effects, it must in some ways be measurable or viewable, or you know, there must be some type of empirical evidence for the cause, since we're obviously seeing the effect. But I haven't heard anybody come say, I've got the, you know, like the Ghostbuster meter here to wave around, and I can read your bioelectric field, and man, it's going haywire as light bulbs are blowing. That'd be a really great place to start. But no one's come up with that device that I know of. Maybe there is, but it would really be great if we were able to say finally, yes, there is this bioelectric field. Yes, that's what's going haywire when all these other things happen. And then look and say, now what influences that bioelectric field to trigger those events? Obviously, if we were writing a television or movie script, it'd be extreme emotion. The guy gets angry and cars fly around and the bad guys get thrown through the window. For me, it's never been like that. The only emotion I could say, well, first of all, I don't get angry as much anymore. So I don't even know if I have gotten angry since my NDE. But I will say this, and it's kind of funny. The one emotion I could say I may have had maybe 3, maybe more times when something happened was being annoyed. Just annoyed. Not angry, not anything extreme, just annoyed. And it's like, okay, I'm annoyed. And then the thing would happen, and I'd probably get more annoyed, like the computer won't work. But I don't know. To me, this would be something to really, and I mean, you kind of have to back into it. You have to back in from the effect to the cause, because it's not like we're running around saying, oh yeah, everybody has this bioelectric field. And yet I know we must. I know that somebody was working with a shark repellent for a while, and the shark repellent was something you would put on your body to present this bioelectric field, for want of a better word, that like a whale would have. So when the shark gets near you, because they use the very tip of their nose as a sensor, when they open their mouth, their eyes roll back, they're just on that, they can feel you electrically. And so what this shark repellent was doing was faking them out by saying, you're getting ready to bite a whale. And oh, I don't want to do that, so I'll swim away. And it works. So in a sort of an oblique way of saying it, we do have this bioelectric field. We've proven it, because we proved that when we falsify it, it has an effect on animal behavior. But it's like we really haven't dug into exactly what it is and exactly what's going on with it when we're having these types of after effects. And I would love to see that, because that would be very strong empirical evidence that's hard to argue with.
Okay. All right. So there are scientists and people like Lynn McTaggart who have studied the power of intention. Now, and that's her term, intention, which is when you have an idea that you have an expected result. You know, intention. People talk about prayer. People talk about meditation. Those are all basically the same thing.
Right.
Okay. But they have found scientifically, now, and this is through experiments worldwide with scientists, physicists, etc., that they can actually alter reality with a group intention. And I mean, you know, she's got manuscripts. I mean, this is a fact, and it's hard to accept, you know, because, well, anyway. So the point is that if we have this ability somehow to transmit an intention, a prayer or a meditation, and it's successful, is it possible that the deceased who have crossed over on the other side and are basically those discarnate people are basically electrical? I mean, aren't we electrical beings? Okay.
Right.
Is it possible that they're using intention from the other side to open a garage door or make the lights flicker or make physical changes on our plane?
Maybe, yeah, because over there, things that are latent or manifest here. It's like I've said before, a shrug there could be an earthquake here. So it could be that attention goes a lot further. By the way, I was going to say, talking about intention and changing things, there are a lot of people staying on street corners with protest signs right now who would probably be the beneficiaries of this practice, right? Like, seems like there's a whole lot of intention out there, and maybe it'll get some results. Maybe it needs to be more coherent. I don't know, but it'd be great to see some positive change come out of it. As to whether it's intention that the people on the other side are using to influence things here or not, I can't say for sure. But I know that no matter what you do, it begins with that. Stephanie.
Yes, I just want to share Paula's a story, and then I have a question that John wants to share, but Paula's came first. She said, "Hi, Jim, I can't put the mic on. It's too loud here, but I wanted to ask about a situation that happened this morning. A coworker I worked with years ago died, and he really was great to me, so I put his picture in my office. Today, I looked at his picture, and it felt like he was looking at me in this world. I was so blown away. I went downstairs to make my breakfast, and a reminder came up telling me today is his birthday, which I had no idea at all. I've had many similar type experiences and wonder what they mean." So that's from Paula. And I don't know if you have anything you want to share before we go to John's question.
I wouldn't be surprised if, here's the thing, my experience, I had no memory of this place. Gone. I'll be honest, I suspect it had to do with how far in I went. But like I said, I don't want to get into a comparison contest here. I do believe that people on the other side can remember us and do remember us. And I think most of it, honestly, most of it's initially probably about sadness and pain because they've died and they see how everyone is all torn up about it. And one of them actually said one time, "You torture the dead." And that's why they have to leave sometimes, is because they just can't take that. They're still humans, they just don't have a body, you know? And so that's something to think about in how we deal with grief. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if at all. I think it's a great thing that you saw that picture differently today or differently on this day because you needed to, because it was right that you do, and you saw then why it was right.
Awesome. Thank you for that. John Pastoral has a question. John, are you able to unmute your phone? Okay, not hearing him.
Oh, wait, here we go. I'm sorry.
Great.
Yay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm used to Zoom and WebEx, and so this was a little bit different for me. But, yeah, Jim, thanks for, and Bethany, thanks for letting me ask a question.
Hey, John.
First of all, Jim, your presentation was fantastic. It really was, and I like I like how you walk through your experiences, and also being a fellow IT guy, been in technology for over 30 years. I can appreciate your analytical and also wanting to, resolve, try and figure things out. Because your presentation, I mean, I've never had an NDE, and this is only the second time that I've been a participant in the group, but I've been, I've embarked on a spiritual journey, and a deep spiritual journey at that, and I've experienced the serendipity and also the electromagnetism. You were talking about how, when electronics will go. But I just wanted to also say, over the past several years, I don't know if you've ever gotten connected into any of the content associated with some of the folks, Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton, Stephen Greer, Higher Consciousness, people like that on YouTube, very, very prominent figures. Because really what you're speaking about, too, is the fact that the love is in the universe. Love is what connects us. So I really resonated with me when you were mentioning the idea that the grace, and whether you believe in God or Allah or whatever your faith is, because, very interfaith, but it really is, they all say that in order to plug into the matrix, the universe, the grid, whatever it is, it's the love. And I've experienced this. So I just wanted to echo that I appreciate your experience and hearing your experience. And for me, it was actually quite serendipitous too, or quite, I guess more timely, the fact that I started listening to you while I was riding my bike on the Vernon Trail.
Wow.
That's how I get connected.
That's
by
perfect.
Seeing nature, appreciating nature, being thankful for what I have and don't have. And once you open up to that thankfulness and that love, you're right, you attract. It's the law of positive attraction. So you're blessed, I guess, with the experiences and having been able to come back and share that with others. So I appreciate that. That's
really beautiful, John. Thank you. And yeah, like, remember I said that over there on the other side, I didn't get this big, unconditional love, big hug or whatever. But the thing is, look at the opportunity I was given there. That if that's not grace, if that's not love, I don't know what is. And as I said before, it's like if you go to boot camp, it's not fun. You're not going to like it, but you are being torn down to be built up to survive what's coming next, so that you can make those better choices. And there are people who would return from the battlefield and see that drill sergeant, and they would look at him differently then than when they left. And they might even say thank you. So love isn't always about hugs and angelic music and, beautiful beings. Sometimes it's about getting your butt kicked, because that's what you need right then. Here we see life through the filters we want. There we see life through the filters we need. And obviously that's what I needed, and that's the way I needed it in order to have my attention focused on the matter at hand. So love comes in a lot of different forms. And what John said, I really want to echo that spirit of gratitude. Absolutely key. Gratitude and humility go together, and love can be expressed in a lot of ways. I see love also as expressed as consciousness. And obviously, the more conscious you are, it's natural to say the more love can flow through you. People who aren't so conscious, maybe a little less so. But consciousness and love to me are one.
Tim, could you share with us how to get your book? Anybody want
to? Yeah. Amazon. Just type in The In-Between Trip of a Lifetime, A Trip of a Lifetime, and it's in paperback and in Kindle. I'm about 3/4 of the way through recording the audio, and I should have it ready the next few days. And then the Audible version will be available as well. I'm an Audible guy because I like to drive around and listen to my books. I don't sit still very well, but this way, at least we'll have digital, the audio, and the print version out. And I'm starting on my, so I've got to finish it so I can start on my second book. I already know what it's going to be about. And I've already, it was, yeah, I feel so funny to say it this way because I don't have to feel that way with you guys, but you guys I see once a month. But I got my download last week for what the next book's going to be. It all came in about 30 minutes. It's tucked in there. All I have to do is start writing, and it's like channeling. When I start writing, it starts flowing. And I was saying before we started tonight, even as I'm reading every word right now to make this audible version, I'm reading stuff I have no idea. Like, where did I know that from? Where did I read that? Or where did I experience that? Who said that? This isn't even my style of speaking, the vocabulary I would use. And I don't know, it just kind of makes it that much more of an interesting journey. So I look forward to seeing what happens with the second book, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
So Dave Mark has a question. Dave, are you able to unmute your phone?
I can see his question.
Oh, great.
All right. On the mailing list, I can take your name down. As far as being clinically dead, I know I suffered acute respiratory failure numerous times, and I've looked through my medical records, I didn't see where it said Jim flatlined. So I don't know, and I think we've all defined that doesn't have to be the trigger event, the threshold event that actually happens for it to have been an experience. But so I honestly, I just guess I can't answer it. I guess if it was important, I could probably go find the surgeon, starting with that young lady, the nurse, and say, I need to push you up against the wall and say, did I die? But I don't really know.
Jim, this is Jack. I wanted to ask if you have asked the hospital to give you a record of your procedure.
Yeah, within a year, I sat down on my computer for 3 hours to fill out all the forms, and then they started asking me for all these codes that I had no clue what that was about. And I called and couldn't get through to anybody, and eventually I just gave up. I said it would take me, I would have to just give up a day or two and go to Hartford and just say, I'm not leaving till you give me what I want. Here's a bag full of money, and I've got plenty of pens for signatures, and here's my ID. Give me what I want. But you know what? It just hasn't been that important to me. If I thought it really needed it for like what credibility or something, I guess I could. But probably, let's face it, most of what it would say is, this is what we gave him this morning, this afternoon. You know, we changed the bedpan. I don't know, whatever. You know, it'd be everything else that I really don't need to know.
Well, the hospitals, they don't like to give you anything in writing because they don't want to get sued, etc. Right. So they give you a long dance. Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Sure. But Dave, Mark, I can certainly, because when Bethany, do we keep a record of these texts as well?
Yes, there is a record that comes with the a chat record that's recorded as well as the video and audio. Sure,
absolutely. I mean, the best thing to do is just stay close to the group here. You know, with the monthly meetings, the newsletters that go out and things like that. But if there's, you can always reach out to me, Jim at jimbruton.com, BRUTON, Jim@jimbruton.com. Happy to talk to you on the phone. If you're around here, happy to meet you in person or by email, text, whatever. I mean, we all have a lot of free time now, it seems. So that's about it.
Some of us do.
Yes, well, yeah. Actually, I'm busier now doing all the book stuff and dealing with the social media. My Facebook friends blew up from 250 to 1,700 in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Anything else? It's 8:53. I know sometimes you have end of meeting business, but if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. All right. I just got offered another airplane project 2 weeks ago. And I was tempted.
What is it, to build another plane?
Yeah, and this one's from 1911. It looks like a flying chicken coop. It's beautiful in my eyes, but I'm like I've said before, if I ever did that, my wife would probably come back and finish the job the airplane crash started. So I won't tempt fate.
Okay. Well, does anyone have any other questions that you want to ask Jim before we sign off? Okay, Jim, we can't thank you enough for doing this presentation, our second video presentation. We had 28 people, which was 7 more than last month. And we hope that our membership will join, more of our members will join as we go along. So would someone like to say a prayer or something as a closing gesture?
I just want to thank Jim for saying yes when I asked. Thank you, Jim, for presenting for us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me, Tina. And it was a pleasure to share with everyone. And by the way, I just wanted to say that I see that Dave Mark asked a follow-up question. Dave, I've got an email started to you to answer it, so you aren't forgotten.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's been a great presentation. Jim, you're always full of great insights and a great story. Thank you again. So with that,
thank you.
I'll say bless you all.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate
Great to see you. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.